A man humiliates his obese wife to please his new mistress, but was shocked when a billionaire claimed her as his. To understand this story better, we need to go back to how it all started. Charlotte Evans wiped down the last table of her morning shift at Le Petit, one of New York City's most exclusive restaurants. Her fingers traced the cool tiled surface as she remembered the countless mornings she'd spent here, arriving before dawn to ensure every surface gleamed before the wealthy patrons arrived for their power lunches and romantic dinners. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, catching the crystal glasses she'd polished an hour ago. She paused to look at her reflection, adjusting her hair which had come loose during her work. Daniel, her husband, had insisted she meet him here for lunch today. The request itself was unusual. In their 15 years of marriage, he'd never once visited her at work. Charlotte's wedding ring caught the light as she straightened her uniform. The gold band had grown loose over the past year as she'd lost weight, trying to please Daniel. He'd grown increasingly cold, making comments about her appearance at every opportunity. She'd started skipping meals, wearing clothes 2 sizes too big, hoping he might look at her the way he used to when they first met. The restaurant's clock showed 11:30 a.m. Her shift ended at noon, giving her just enough time to change into the dress she'd brought, a navy blue number she'd saved 3 months to buy. The fabric pulled awkwardly at her shoulders as she changed in the staff bathroom, and the hem hung slightly crooked. She'd tried to fix it herself, remembering the fashion design classes she'd loved in college before dropping out to support Daniel through business school. The staff bathroom mirror showed dark circles under her eyes, souvenirs from nights spent crying silently into her pillow. She applied concealer with trembling fingers, remembering Daniel's words from last week. "You're embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." She added a touch of lipstick, the same shade she'd worn on their first date, when he'd called her beautiful. Through the bathroom door, she heard the restaurant coming alive. The clink of silverware, the murmur of early diners, the gentle music from the piano in the corner, sounds she usually heard while scrubbing floors and cleaning windows. Today she'd sit out there, pretending to belong among the people she served every day. Charlotte stepped into the dining room, her sensible shoes squeaking slightly against the freshly polished floor. Several regular customers did double takes. They were used to seeing her in her cleaning uniform, head down as she worked. Mrs. Henderson, who came every Tuesday for lunch, gave her a small wave of recognition. The hostess, Jenny, greeted her with surprise. Charlotte had covered Jenny's morning cleaning duties many times when she'd been running late. Now Jenny led her through the maze of tables, past the fountain where Charlotte had scraped gum from underneath the marble just yesterday. Her heart stopped when she saw Daniel's table. He sat with Bianca Turner, the restaurant's owner. Bianca wore a red dress that probably cost more than Charlotte's monthly salary. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight, making it look like spun gold. Charlotte had cleaned Bianca's office hundreds of times, careful not to disturb the awards and photographs that covered her desk. Daniel barely looked up as Charlotte approached. His suit was new, she hadn't seen it before. His cologne smelled different too, more expensive than the one she'd given him for Christmas. The way he angled his body away from her empty chair made her stomach twist. Bianca's perfectly manicured hand rested near Daniel's on the white tablecloth. Charlotte recognized the slight smudge of lipstick on Daniel's water glass, the same shade Bianca always wore, the one that left marks on the glasses Charlotte cleaned each morning. The waiter appeared with menus, addressing only Daniel and Bianca. Charlotte stared at the prices, calculating how many floors she'd need to mop to afford the cheapest salad. She ordered water, her voice barely a whisper. Other diners filled the tables around them. Charlotte recognized them all. The businessman who always left coffee rings, the lady who powdered her nose and left dust everywhere, the couple who sneaked extra bread rolls into their designer bags. She'd cleaned up after each of them, invisible until now. Daniel cleared his throat, finally looking at her. His eyes were cold, like the marble tables she polished every morning. He reached into his briefcase, the expensive one she'd saved for months to give him last birthday. The leather creaked as he pulled out a manila envelope. The restaurant sounds faded away as Daniel spoke. Words like embarrassment and liability cut through the air. Each syllable felt like the harsh cleaning chemicals that had roughened her hands over the years. Bianca watched with a small smile, the same one she wore when inspecting Charlotte's cleaning work. "I don't want you anymore. You are such a cheap embarrassment." Charlotte watched, remembering their good and bad days until this moment. Ever since he got a job here at Le Petit, he stopped being kind to her, needing her, holding her, even wanting to see her. Without any skills whatsoever, she had taken the cleaning job he had worked out for her to fend for herself. "I want to be with Bianca. I love her." The words broke the noise in Charlotte's head. He didn't want her anymore. He wanted someone else. After the years of sacrifice, he was mocking her in front of the whole world. Charlotte's fingers trembled as she picked up the pen, the same one she'd seen Bianca use to sign checks and contracts. The divorce papers felt rough against her fingertips, so different from the smooth surfaces she cleaned daily. She signed her name, muscle memory from signing countless cleaning logs taking over. She stood up immediately, her chair scraping against the floor she'd mopped that morning. Her legs carried her past the tables she knew by heart, the wobbly one by the window, the one with the scratch she carefully polished each day, the corner table where young couples got engaged while she watched from behind her cleaning cart. She'd return tomorrow at dawn, rubber gloves in hand, ready to clean up other people's messes. But something had changed. For the first time in years, she wouldn't be cleaning up after Daniel. Adrian Blackwood sat in his private dining room at Le Petit, absently stirring his black coffee. The morning paper lay untouched beside his half-eaten breakfast, as his attention fixed on the scene unfolding in the main dining area. Through the glass partition, he watched a man in an expensive suit tear apart a woman's dignity piece by piece. The woman's quiet strength caught Adrian's eye. She held herself with grace, even as tears rolled down her cheeks. He recognized that strength, the same kind his mother had shown while raising 3 children alone after his father abandoned them. The man's cruel words carried through the partition, each insult delivered with calculated precision. Adrian pulled out his phone and typed the man's name, Daniel Evans, financial advisor at Turner Restaurant Group. A few more taps revealed his connection to Bianca Turner, the restaurant's owner. The pieces fell into place as Adrian observed Bianca's satisfied smirk while Daniel pushed divorce papers across the table. For 5 days, Adrian gathered information. His assistant compiled reports on Turner Restaurant Group's finances, revealing a few financial needs here and there. Bianca Turner had inherited the company from her father 2 years ago, and her inexperience showed in the numbers. 3 restaurants had closed in the past year, and employee turnover rates soared above industry standards. On the 6th day, Adrian made his move. His investment firm submitted an offer to buy Turner Restaurant Group. The price was fair but firm, backed by documentation of mismanagement and potential labor violations. Bianca's lawyers advised her to accept, knowing Adrian's reputation for hostile takeovers when initial offers were refused. Adrian studied the employee files as ownership transferred. Charlotte Evans worked as a cleaner at Le Petit for 6 years, arriving at dawn each morning, never missing a shift. Her employment records showed glowing reviews from immediate supervisors, though none had reached Bianca's desk. Daniel's file revealed mediocre performance masked by strategic friendships with management. The first company meeting under new ownership brought everyone together in the corporate headquarters. Adrian watched from his office as Charlotte entered the building, her steps hesitant but determined. She carried paperwork, her resignation letter, he guessed. Through the glass walls, he saw Daniel and Bianca whispering, their smug expressions telling him everything. Adrian straightened his tie and stepped into the conference room. The employees fell silent as he took his place at the head of the table. His eyes met Charlotte's across the room, seeing the same quiet dignity she'd shown in the restaurant. Daniel sat next to Bianca, his hand resting possessively on her chair. The whispers started as Charlotte made her way to Adrian's assistant to hand in her paperwork. Daniel's voice carried across the room, dripping with disdain as he commented on her presence. Bianca's tinkling laugh encouraged others to join in, creating a wave of cruel amusement at Charlotte's expense. Adrian rose from his chair, his movement silencing the room. Each step toward Charlotte measured and deliberate, his mind racing through potential outcomes. This moment would define his leadership of the company. He'd seen too many good people crushed by corporate politics and personal vendettas. The weight of his mother's words from years ago pressed on his mind. Power means nothing if you don't use it to protect those who need it. His mother had cleaned houses to put food on their table, enduring the same kind of humiliation he'd witnessed Charlotte face. Adrian reached Charlotte just as she was about to hand over her resignation. His fingers brushed against the envelope as he took it from her, tearing it in half without reading it. The sound echoed through the silent room. Every eye watched as he turned to face the assembled employees, his hand coming to rest gently on Charlotte's shoulder. The words flowed easily as he introduced Charlotte as his wife and the company's new CEO. He felt her slight tremor beneath his hand, but her chin lifted, showing that same unbreakable spirit he'd first noticed. Daniel's face reddened, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Bianca gripped her designer pen so hard it snapped, leaving ink stains on her expensive blouse. Adrian guided Charlotte to the head of the table, pulling out his own chair for her. The room remained frozen as she sat down, her movements careful but assured. He took the seat beside her, noticing how she squared her shoulders and faced the crowd of surprised faces. The meeting proceeded according to plan, with Adrian announcing new company policies. He watched Charlotte absorb every detail, her mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. When she asked her first question about employee welfare programs, her voice carried clearly across the room. Afterward, in his office, Adrian explained his proposition. A business arrangement, he called it, a chance to give Daniel and Bianca a taste of their own medicine while protecting her from gossip. Charlotte listened carefully, her fingers tracing the torn edges of her resignation letter still scattered on his desk. The sun set over the city as they finalized their agreement. Charlotte would move into his guest house, learn the business, and help him reshape the company culture. In return, he would give her the platform to rebuild her life on her own terms. As she left his office that evening, Adrian noticed her walking taller, her steps more confident than when she'd entered that morning. A text from his assistant interrupted his thoughts. Daniel had already updated his social media relationship status, tagging Bianca. Adrian smiled, knowing their small victory today was just the beginning. Tomorrow, Charlotte would return not as a victim of their cruelty, but as their boss. Charlotte unpacked her suitcase in Adrian's guest house, laying out the few possessions she'd brought from her old life. Each item sparked memories: the faded sketchbook from her college days, a worn sewing kit, and pencils she'd kept sharp but unused for years. She placed them on the wooden desk by the window, arranging them as if setting up a workspace she'd forgotten she needed. The guest house kitchen still held the warmth from the meal Adrian's housekeeper had prepared earlier. A bowl of fresh fruit sat on the counter, oranges, apples, and pears arranged simply. Charlotte picked up an orange, remembering how Daniel used to criticize her food choices. She peeled it slowly, savoring the citrus scent, eating each segment without guilt. Her first week as CEO started with learning. Adrian guided her through financial reports, explaining market trends and business strategies. She absorbed everything, taking notes in her precise handwriting. The same attention to detail that had made her an excellent cleaner now helped her grasp complex business concepts. During lunch breaks, Charlotte discovered the company's employee files. Stories emerged from the paperwork: single mothers working multiple shifts, students paying for college, immigrants supporting families overseas. She remembered their faces from her cleaning days, when she'd worked alongside them in the early morning hours. On her 10th day, Charlotte implemented her first policy change. The cleaning staff would receive health benefits and paid time off. She signed the documents with steady hands, remembering her own years without insurance. When she announced the changes, she saw tears in the eyes of Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd cleaned restaurants for 20 years without a single paid sick day. Each evening, Charlotte returned to the guest house and pulled out her old sketchbook. The designs inside reminded her of dreams she'd set aside. Page after page showed dresses, suits, and casual wear for women of all sizes. She'd drawn them during quiet moments between cleaning shifts, imagining clothes that would make everyone feel beautiful. Adrian noticed her sketches one evening when he brought over company documents. His interest seemed genuine as she explained her vision for inclusive fashion. He mentioned an upcoming design competition, laying the entry forms on her desk without pressure. The papers sat there for 3 days while Charlotte gathered her courage. The competition entry required 5 complete designs. Charlotte worked through the night, refining her old sketches. She incorporated elements from her new life: strong lines inspired by business suits, comfortable cuts that allowed movement, elegant details that didn't sacrifice practicality. Her hands remembered the motion of drawing, as if they'd never stopped. Word spread through the company about her competition entry. Most employees offered encouragement, remembering her kindness from her cleaning days. But whispers followed her too, Daniel and Bianca's voices carrying tales about her marriage to Adrian, questioning her qualifications, mocking her ambitions. Charlotte pushed through the gossip, focusing on her designs. She visited fabric stores after work, running her fingers over materials she'd only dreamed of using before. The salespeople recognized her name now, treating her with respect rather than the dismissal she'd known as a cleaner. She selected fabrics carefully, matching textures and colors to her vision. The guest house's spare room transformed into a studio. Charlotte borrowed a sewing machine from the company's alterations department. She worked late into the night, measuring and cutting patterns. The gentle hum of the machine mixed with soft music, creating a peaceful atmosphere so different from her life with Daniel. Adrian kept his distance but supported her work. He arranged for a professional photographer to document her designs, hired models of different sizes to try the samples, and provided contact information for manufacturers. Each gesture showed respect for her vision, while allowing her to maintain independence. As her collection took shape, Charlotte's confidence grew. She held meetings with department heads, making decisions that balanced business needs with employee welfare. The restaurant's profits increased as staff turnover decreased. Even those who doubted her began seeking her advice on operational matters. The design competition deadline approached as autumn arrived. Charlotte finalized her collection, adding small details that reflected her journey. A hidden pocket in a business dress, perfect for storing notes. A jacket cut to flatter while providing comfort during long work days. A formal gown that made its wearer feel powerful rather than exposed. During final fittings, Charlotte overheard Daniel and Bianca in the hallway. Their words carried the same cruelty as always, but they no longer held power over her. She adjusted a hemline, discussed fabric choices with her team, and signed paperwork for a new employee benefits package. Their voices faded into background noise. The evening before submitting her competition entry, Charlotte sat in her studio surrounded by her completed designs. Each piece represented more than fashion. They showed her transformation from invisible cleaner to confident creator. The woman who'd signed divorce papers in tears had become someone new, someone stronger. Adrian stopped by with dinner, placing it quietly on her desk before leaving her to work. The gesture reminded her that some people could care without trying to control. She ate while reviewing her competition application, her designs hanging around the room like promises of a future she was finally ready to claim. Adrian stood at his office window, watching Charlotte cross the parking lot toward her car. 5 months had passed since their arrangement began, and each day brought unexpected changes to his carefully ordered life. The photo on his desk caught his eye, Anna, his first love, smiling at the camera 6 months before the accident. He hadn't moved the picture in 8 years. Today marked the anniversary of Anna's death. Adrian usually spent it alone in his office, buried in work. Instead, he found himself thinking about Charlotte's laughter during yesterday's board meeting when she'd outsmarted Daniel's attempt to undermine her new employee welfare program. The morning's financial reports sat unopened on his desk. 8 years of focusing solely on business acquisitions and profit margins had earned him a reputation as a cold, calculating businessman. Yet Charlotte's presence in the company had changed things. Employees smiled more. The turnover rate dropped. Even the cafeteria food improved after she noticed the old menu's poor quality. Adrian picked up Anna's photo, studying it. She would have liked Charlotte. Both of them shared that same genuine care for others, the ability to see worth in people others overlooked. He placed the frame in his desk drawer, his fingers lingering on the silver frame before closing it. The evening brought another business dinner. Charlotte sat beside him, handling investors' questions about company direction with growing confidence. Her ideas about ethical business practices and employee-first policies impressed even the most skeptical board members. Adrian found himself watching her hands as she spoke, noting how she used them to emphasize points she felt passionate about. As dessert arrived, Charlotte mentioned her latest design project. Her eyes lit up describing a dress she'd created for Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter's graduation. Adrian realized he'd missed half the investors' conversation, caught up in her enthusiasm. The familiar pain of loss mixed with something new, a warmth he hadn't felt since Anna. Their late-night strategy sessions became longer. They moved from the office to the guest house's kitchen, spreading papers across her table while sharing meals. Adrian discovered Charlotte's fondness for spicy food, her habit of doodling designs on meeting notes, her ability to remember every employee's birthday. One evening, reviewing next year's budget, Charlotte challenged his standard business model. Her alternative proposal balanced profit with social responsibility. Adrian argued back, 8 years of business strategy clashing with her fresh perspective. The discussion grew heated, passionate, both of them standing their ground. Mid-argument, Adrian realized he felt alive. The careful walls he'd built after Anna's death crumbled as Charlotte questioned his assumptions, pushed him to think differently, made him defend ideas he'd accepted without question. Without planning to, he kissed her. The kiss lasted moments. Charlotte stepped back first, surprise clear in her brown eyes. Adrian apologized immediately, professional words masking personal panic. They returned to budget discussions, but something had shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained vanished. Following days brought changes. Adrian found reasons to walk by Charlotte's office. Their shared meals included personal stories, his childhood with a single mother, her dreams of designing clothes that made women feel beautiful. He learned she hummed while reading reports, preferred tea to coffee, and kept chocolate in her desk drawer for rough days. Charlotte's influence spread beyond the office. Adrian's house staff noted he ate dinner at home more often, usually inviting Charlotte to join him. They talked about books. She loved mysteries, he preferred biographies. She recommended novels that made him laugh for the first time in years. He shared business books that she filled with notes and sketches. Their fake marriage gained authenticity. At company events, they no longer needed to pretend their small touches and shared smiles. Adrian caught himself reaching for her hand without thinking. Charlotte began finishing his sentences during meetings. Even their arguments carried an undertone of affection. The photo of Anna stayed in Adrian's drawer, but its power diminished. He still visited her grave, but now he told her about Charlotte, about rediscovering joy in simple moments. Charlotte's morning texts asking about his day, her habit of leaving encouraging notes for the cleaning staff, the way she remembered everyone's coffee orders. Daniel and Bianca's attempts to cause trouble became minor annoyances rather than real threats. Adrian watched Charlotte handle their schemes with grace, turning their malice into opportunities for positive change. Her strength amazed him, not the harsh strength he'd cultivated after losing Anna, but a gentle power that made others want to be better. 8 years of loneliness began to fade. Adrian found himself planning a future beyond the next business acquisition. He noticed jewelry stores on his way to meetings, imagining rings on Charlotte's finger. The thought of commitment no longer brought panic. Instead, it felt like coming home. Yet fear lingered. Adrian recognized the signs of falling in love again, and part of him wanted to retreat behind his old defenses. Charlotte deserved someone whole, someone without his scars. But every morning, seeing her car pull into the parking lot, his heart chose hope over fear. Bianca's heels clicked against the floor as she marched into Adrian's office, waving a folder of papers. The bright lights within the building illuminated her triumphant smile as she placed the documents on his desk. Each page revealed Charlotte's past financial records, the inheritance Daniel had spent, the empty accounts, the mounting debts she'd hidden. Adrian read through the papers while Bianca watched. His fingers pressed harder into each page as he discovered the extent of Daniel's betrayal. Charlotte's inheritance, meant to fund her fashion education, had vanished into Daniel's failed investments. The money she'd earned cleaning had paid their bills while Daniel portrayed success to his colleagues. The truth settled into Adrian's mind like poison. Charlotte's eagerness to accept his business arrangement, her quick adaptation to luxury, her determination to succeed, all of it looked different through this new lens. He remembered other women who'd sought his wealth after Anna's death, their calculated moves to win his trust. Minutes after Bianca left, Adrian canceled his lunch with Charlotte. His secretary forwarded all her calls to voicemail. He buried himself in acquisition reports, ignoring the text messages appearing on his phone. Each one from Charlotte felt like an accusation. Had every moment between them been carefully planned? Charlotte waited in the guest house that evening, her competition designs spread across the table. The week before the competition, she needed Adrian's final approval on company resources for her presentation. Hours passed. Her calls went unanswered. The designs, once filled with promise, seemed to mock her with their optimism. Morning brought no relief. Adrian's car wasn't in its usual spot when Charlotte arrived at the office. Her key card denied access to his private elevator. Emails about urgent business decisions received automated responses. The distance felt worse than Daniel's cruelty. At least Daniel had shown his contempt openly. Bianca's smirk in the hallway told Charlotte everything. The truth emerged through office gossip. Her financial records had surfaced. Years of shame crashed back as colleagues whispered about her past. The same people who'd praised her business acumen now questioned her integrity. Each glance carried judgment, each whisper held accusations. Charlotte entered her office, closed the door, and faced her reflection in the window. The woman who stared back wore designer clothes and carried an executive title, but underneath she remained the same person who'd scrubbed floors at dawn. Her worth didn't come from Daniel's stolen inheritance or Adrian's borrowed status. The design competition materials covered her desk. Charlotte picked up her sketches, studying each line and curve. These designs came from her hands, her vision, her understanding of women who felt invisible. No one could take that away, not Daniel, not Bianca, not even Adrian's silence. Charlotte worked through the night. Her sewing machine made the usual noise as she made final adjustments to each piece. The cleaning staff found her there at dawn, pins in her mouth as she hemmed a dress. They brought her coffee and shared stories of their own struggles, reminding her why she'd created these designs in the first place. The competition arrived on a bright morning. Charlotte dressed in her own creation, a bright red suit that made her feel strong. The design team she'd hired helped transport her collection to the venue. Each person had once worked alongside her cleaning the restaurants. They believed in her vision because they'd lived it. Backstage was alive with activity as models tried on her clothes. Charlotte adjusted necklines and smoothed seams, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Each piece represented a woman's story. The single mother who needed comfort and style, the executive proving her worth, the dreamer building a new life. The judges moved through the collections, making notes and asking questions. Charlotte presented her designs with confidence, explaining her choice of inclusive sizing and practical elegance. She didn't mention her past as a cleaner or her role as CEO. These designs would stand on their own merit. Halfway through her presentation, Adrian appeared in the audience. Charlotte continued speaking, her voice clear and professional. She described her inspiration, women who worked hard, dreamed big, and deserved beauty in their lives. Each word carried truth she'd learned through experience. The final model walked the runway in Charlotte's signature piece, a red dress that transformed from business wear to evening elegance. The audience murmured appreciation. Charlotte saw Adrian watching, his expression intense. She turned back to the judges, focusing on their questions rather than the pain in her heart. As she accepted the first place award, Charlotte remembered signing divorce papers in a restaurant nearly a year ago. That moment had felt like an ending. Standing on stage now, holding her trophy, she recognized it had been a beginning. She'd lost an inheritance, but found her voice. Adrian waited backstage, holding a bouquet of roses. His apology spilled out in rushed words about fear and trust and learning to love again. Charlotte listened, her award in one hand and her designs surrounding them. His words mattered less than his presence. He'd come to support her triumph despite his doubts. They had much to discuss, trust to rebuild, and wounds to heal. But as Charlotte looked at her collection, now bearing the competition's prestigious seal of approval, she knew she could face anything. She'd proven her worth, not just to Adrian or the judges, but to herself. Adrian spent 3 weeks planning the proposal. Each detail mattered, from the timing at the prestigious party to the vintage ring he'd found, reminiscent of the designs in Charlotte's old sketchbooks. He kept the ring in his desk drawer beside Anna's photo, both pieces of his past and future sitting together in harmony. The annual charity party transformed the hotel ballroom into a showcase of wealth and influence. Charlotte arrived in one of her own designs, a silver gown that caught the light as she moved. Her collection's success had earned her recognition beyond the company. 3 major retailers had already placed orders for her inclusive clothing line. Daniel stood near the champagne fountain, his expensive suit slightly too tight around the middle. His recent demotion to junior accountant showed in the way other executives avoided his attempts at conversation. Bianca had stopped returning his calls 2 weeks ago, after her failed attempt to secure a position with a competing restaurant group. Charlotte moved through the crowd with easy grace, greeting employees by name. The cleaning staff had received special invitations this year, her first act after being named permanent CEO. They wore clothes from her new collection, pieces she'd designed with them in mind. Their presence reminded everyone of the company's transformation under her leadership. Adrian watched Charlotte from across the room. She listened to a young waitress's story about going back to school, made possible by the company's new education program. The waitress cried as she hugged Charlotte, mascara smearing onto the shoulder of the silver gown. Charlotte didn't pull away. She held the girl until her tears stopped. The ring weighed in Adrian's pocket as he approached them. The last year played through his mind. Charlotte's first day as CEO, their late-night strategy sessions, the moment he'd realized he loved her. He remembered her strength during the design competition, how she'd proven herself not just to him, but to the entire industry. The orchestra began playing as Adrian reached Charlotte's side. She smiled at him, the real smile she saved for private moments, not the professional one she used for business. Her hand found his automatically, their fingers intertwining with practiced familiarity. The fear that had haunted him since Anna's death felt distant now, replaced by certainty. Adrian led Charlotte to the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted around them, conversations quieting as they recognized something important was happening. Even Daniel stopped trying to network, his attention drawn to the scene unfolding before him. The proposal itself felt surreal, and so beautiful it brought a few people to tears. Adrian spoke from his heart, telling Charlotte how she'd taught him to love again. He talked about her kindness, her vision, her ability to see beauty in everyone. The ring gleamed in the light as he offered it to her, not as a business arrangement this time, but as a promise of forever. Charlotte's tears fell freely as she said yes. The ballroom erupted in applause, genuine celebration from employees whose lives she'd touched. The cleaning staff cheered the loudest, their joy echoing off the crystal chandeliers. This moment belonged to everyone who'd witnessed Charlotte's journey from cleaner to CEO. Through the crowd's excitement, Charlotte noticed Daniel standing alone. His phone displayed Bianca's social media update, photos of her engagement to a real estate mogul. The timing seemed like poetry, karma delivering its own kind of justice. Daniel looked up, met Charlotte's eyes, and finally saw what he'd thrown away. The evening flowed into celebration. Charlotte and Adrian danced, her diamond ring catching the light with each turn. They moved together naturally now, no longer playing roles but simply being themselves. The stiffness of their early arrangement had melted into real partnership, stronger for the challenges they'd overcome. As midnight approached, Charlotte excused herself to check on the cleaning staff working the event. She found Mrs. Rodriguez supervising the kitchen cleanup, wearing the designer dress Charlotte had given her. They hugged, both remembering early mornings spent cleaning together. Mrs. Rodriguez whispered blessings in Spanish, calling Charlotte mi hija, my daughter. Adrian found them there, talking and laughing in the kitchen, while helping to pack leftover food for the shelter. He joined in without hesitation, rolling up his sleeves to wash dishes alongside the staff. His mother had raised him to respect hard work in all its forms. Charlotte caught his eye and smiled, understanding passing between them. The next morning brought change to the company. Charlotte's office wall now displayed her fashion designs beside the profit charts. Adrian moved his desk into the connecting room, removing the wall between their spaces. They worked as true partners, each bringing their strengths to build something meaningful. Their wedding invitation included every employee, from executives to cleaning staff. Charlotte designed the uniforms for the catering team herself, making sure they felt like guests rather than servers. The ceremony celebrated not just their love, but the community they'd built together. Daniel watched their success from his small accounting office. Each morning he saw Charlotte and Adrian arrive together, saw how employees brightened at their presence. The restaurants thrived, Charlotte's clothing line expanded, and their reputation for ethical business practices drew admiration from the industry. The corporate newsletters now featured employee stories alongside financial reports. Children of cleaning staff attended college on company scholarships. The restaurants installed professional-grade washing machines to ease the physical strain on workers. Each change reflected Charlotte's understanding of what people really needed. Charlotte kept her first cleaning uniform, framed in her office as a reminder. Sometimes, when facing difficult decisions, she touched the rough fabric and remembered where she'd started. Her journey from invisible cleaner to respected CEO reminded her to look for hidden strength in others. The company's success proved that kindness and profit could coexist. Charlotte and Adrian's marriage showed that love could heal old wounds and build new dreams. Their story became legend in the company, proof that true worth isn't measured by where you start, but by how you treat others along the way. If this story gave you a fresh perspective, drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss out on more stories that challenge the way we see the world. Let's keep sharing, learning, and growing together. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.